Alright guys, we're here, we're going to take an office day. We're going to talk Lightroom Classic CC, what I do to my photos to get them ready for Photoshop. Now I use Lightroom as an asset management tool and to kind of do some basic edits to bring them into Photoshop. And so don't expect an A to Z Lightroom kind of thing where I take it from import all the way to export. I import my photos in Lightroom, catalog them, put them into collections, and then I do some basic develop stuff on them. And then I split them out to Photoshop. So that's what you can expect from this video. Again, if you're looking for A to Z, that one will be coming later on. This is just kind of a quick 10-minute thing to get you kind of versed in some of the things in Lightroom. So without further ado, we're going to check this image out and we'll go from there. Here we are in Lightroom. I'm going to run through quickly just what these panels are. We have library, develop, and then web print, slideshow, book, map. The only two I really use in Lightroom are library and develop. I've used these off and on sometimes, but very rarely, not enough to go through right now. So first thing I need to do when I come back from a trip or a photo outing is import my photos. So I go down to the big import button, I click it, and I find the photos that I want to import. And now I've already imported all the photos from this trip, so I'm not gonna do them again, but I basically go down to the folder that I have them in, and I find them, and then I click them. So let's say I bring in these photos that I don't want. This series, shift click, put the check mark. Now I don't want them to come into the actual MacBook. I want them to go to my external hard drive. So I'm going to create a folder for this, and so I can include in a subfolder, and I can create whatever I want to create here. I could say Lightroom tutorial. So now those are all going to go into a Lightroom tutorial folder, separate from my actual computer's hard drive and deep into my external hard drive. And so here's the point where it's easy for me to add some keywords and maybe specific to this place or these set of photos. And so I can say these ones are a panorama, and from Yoho National Park, and this is Emerald Lake. There's snow and winter, Canadian Rockies. Now, the reason for adding keywords is because it will make it simpler for you in the future to ever find these photos. You can search for these keywords and your photos will come up. So whatever you feel is going to be something useful for you, that's going to help you to remember where these photos are and what was around when you took them, put those in your keywords. The other benefit of adding keywords is they're baked into the actual metadata of your photo, so you're able to it'll come up on Google searches and that kind of thing, and the keywords are embedded into that photo, and so you don't have to worry about adding keywords. If you put them into your website, that kind of thing, they're already there. So these are some photos, keywords that are kind of unique to these. I can add more. Generally the list is maybe a little bit bigger, but for the purposes of this tutorial, it'll be enough. And so Lightroom is going to import those files, and it's going to put us into this catalog. And so there's different things. I have all my photographs all synced, quick collection, and then previous import. So these are where the previous import were, what was last imported. So Lightroom is saying that we should maybe work on these first. I maybe don't want to, so I can shift click and I can go to my collections. And so if I want them to be a part of my winter Canadian Rockies collection, which I do, I'm going to go right click, set as target collection, go back up to my previous import, shift click, and then hit B. And B just added all of these, hitting the B key, added all these keys to the collection that I had targeted. So now you can see they're all in my collection. So I don't need to go through and try and find all these photographs throughout this 6,393. I can if I imported something after this and I wanted to go back, it's easier for me to find them because they're in a collection of something that are all unique. And even inside this collection, I can filter and search out Emerald Lake. And so anything with the Emerald Lake keyword is going to come up. So This is where your keywording is really important. This is where Lightroom really I think it's the only reason I would ever keep it is because of its asset management capabilities. It allows me to find photos quickly instead of searching through hard drives of information. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete these. I don't want them. There's a reason I didn't bring them in. Not those ones. There's a reason I didn't bring them in. Okay. So now that I've imported all my photos from the trip, and I want to make some edits on some of them. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to come down to right here. So you can see this photo. Bring these in. So this photo I have several different exposures of. The dynamic range was crazy in here. I had to take a few different exposures. So you can see on this top right the histogram and my settings here. So if I go over, you can see how much variability there was in my shutter speeds. There's quite a big difference to get the blacks kind of, a little bit of detail in them. So I didn't use all of them. I think I used 3 or 4 of them. I went kind of too far either way, but you're only there once, you're set up, you may as well take the photos instead of, coming back and being like, oh man, darn it, I don't have that information. So this histogram is something that, is really important to understand. You have all your, everywhere where there's a pixel of information, there's a spike. And so you see where most of your information is on this one is kind of in the blacks and the shadows. And so you can see on the, right down here, it's telling you what's here. So we have blacks, shadows, exposure, highlights, and whites. And so if I were to click here, I can change the values of each of those things without going in here and bumping sliders. I can play around with my histogram. And so, I can bring those whites right up to the edge, bring my blacks right down. And so I get, a nice contrast. And this is typically how I adjust. I make adjustments here instead of down here. And then I can kind of tweak things here. And so you're looking for something that's fairly, well balanced. And so you can see the highlights here are blown out, and this is warning me. If I click this, it's supposed to highlight. If I bring this back to 0, I guess. Sorry. So that's highlighting my highlights that are clipped. So those are gone. This exposure was for anything in these kind of darker details. So I have them back, but it's still not a nice photo. I like the sky detail in there. So you can see how I blended a few of these exposures. So I'm going to go show you how I set a white balance. So what I do is I crank the vibrancy and saturation up, and I kind of see how much of what is in it. And right now it's a lot of blue. And the reason I do that is just to do some double checks, just to make sure I don't change too much. Make sure I'm not going too extreme one way or the other. If I dial back the vibrancy and saturation, I can see there is a lot of orange tone in here. And so if I were to actually bump this back up to daylight or kind of as shot, it's a lot warmer, and I don't think I like that. I like the blue tone that came from the blue skies above. So I set my exposure my white balance accordingly. Clarity, dehaze. The only time I'll use clarity is if I'm in a scene like this, where there's a lot of detail and kind of contrast that I want to bring out. So in these rocks and stuff and all this detail, there's a lot of stuff that I want to add, bring some different contrast out. So if I leave that at 0, it kind of looks fairly, washed out. If I bring that up, it's starting to look a lot more like rock. And so that's what I wanted. Dehaze, again, something I'm gentle with. This is actually quite a bit for this scene. Looking at it now, I don't know why I did that. So typically, 10 is as high as I would go, and quite often I'm negative. Your contrast slider, you can make a nice S curve in here and really kind of, whoa, not that, you can make yourself, if this is a single exposure, I would do more of this. The fact that it's not, and I'm going to be doing some exposure blending in Photoshop, I leave that alone. The HSL, again, I leave alone. I play with color in Photoshop. I don't touch that too much. Same as split toning. The only time I'll use split toning is if I'm looking to save an image. That's the only time I'll ever use it. Sharpening, I take that completely off. I do my sharpening in Photoshop. Lens reduction, I put on a little bit of that. Color I leave on default. Luminance I bring up to about 20. Profile corrections, I always enable those, and chromatic aberration is enabled in the exposures that I used. So once I'm done all that, I go back to my library. I go to my series and shift click or shift, and then use the arrow keys, and I sync settings. And I can sync whatever I made those adjustments across, and that's going to paste the same kind of adjustments to each photo, so that these are all have the same value. So if I go into here, the belt module again, if I go over, you can see all these adjustments are exactly the same. So now I'm going to bring them into Photoshop to exposure blend them. I right click, I go edit in, and then here I can open as layers in Photoshop. And so that's going to open each of these files up, each of these 5 files onto different layers in one document. So that saves me from opening up in 5 new documents and copy pasting them into the same one. So this saves me time on that. So this opens as layers in Photoshop, and then from there I do a bunch of exposure blending and a bunch of color editing and that kind of thing, and contrast adjustments, dodging, burning. Most of my work's in Photoshop, but Lightroom is what I use to do a lot of asset management and then just my basic edits instead of using Camera Raw. So, right, that's it guys for this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. Getting your photos ready for Photoshop. Again, expect an A to Z Lightroom down the road, and definitely a bunch of Photoshop kind of tutorials on how I get my images looking the way I do. And so, like this video if you did, I'd appreciate it, and subscribe if you like the content of my channel. Cheers guys, thanks for watching.